As soon as I made it, I got an acetate of it, and as soon as I got the acetate, I played it at the Big Beat Boutique. And as soon as I played it at the Big Beat Boutique, I knew we were onto something major here.
Right about now, the Funk Soul Brother. Check it out now, the Funk Soul Brother. Right about now, the Funk Soul Brother. Check it out now.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and good night. My name is Fatboy Slim, and this is the making of Rockefeller Skank. I became Fatboy Slim because I think I'd outgrown being in bands. I was like 15, 20 years into my career, and I'd finally realised that I'm a better DJ than I am a bass player or a songwriter. I was touring with Freak Power and not many people were coming to see us, and it was costing me tons of money. And then I realised if I DJ'd, like 4 times as many people would come. Damien from Loaded Records was launching a label called Skin, and he had this idea of like the music I was playing in my DJ sets, which was not house music, but it was kind of based on the energy of house, but using hooks from pop records, beats from hip hop records. There was this kind of other thing that became known as Big Beat. At the time we didn't realise. We were just looking for something else to do, and Fatboy Slim was the outlet for that. After the first Fatboy album, I was aware that something was happening. Better Living Through Chemistry, had been released as an album, which most dance bands didn't do in those days. And we were tickling people in all the right places. We were kind of aware that people were getting excited about what we were doing. By this point, I've got my own club called the Big Beat Boutique. When I was doing the second album, knew what I wanted to do and that it could cross over. B, I had a club that I could try everything out each week. But also there was a feeling of like anything goes. It was like the more musical rules we broke, the more people liked us. The more actual rules we broke in our behaviour, people seemed to like us more. So it was a carte blanche to experiment and to live slightly outside the law. While I was making the second album, I did a few remixes. One was Brimful of Asher, one was Renegade Master. And both of them were like, they got in like the top 10. And so by the time the second album was coming out, we kind of knew this could break through into the charts, and hopefully this is what will happen with the next album.
Right about now, the Funk Soul Brother.
I can't remember exactly what decisions were made about what. All I know is that I was playing every weekend, and then come Sunday night, I wasn't capable of operating any heavy machinery or driving or anything. So all the ideas that had come out of the weekend's DJing would then go into the studio. So Sunday night till about Wednesday, I would just be locked in the studio, feverishly beavering away. It's weird because that's like probably the most successful album of my whole career, and it was the easiest to make. It was like no soul searching, it was just like instinct and being in the right place at the right time musically. I made Praise You, Right Here and Right Now, Rockefeller Skank, and Always Read the Label in the same 2 or 3 days. They're like next to each other on the discs. So that was kind of that was my purple week of my career. The element that came first in Rockefeller Skank was me ripping off a record that I was severely impressed by. There's a record by the Natural Born Chillers called Rock the Funky Beat.
If you really like to rock the funky beats, rock the funky beats, the funky beats. If you really like to rock the funky beats, the funky beats, rock the funky beats.
When I heard that, I was just like, that is so clever, because they'd taken, I think it was Chuck D from a Public Enemy live thing, and he just said, if you really want to rock the funky beats, and then somebody had chopped it into syllables and obviously had each syllable on a keyboard, so you go, if you really want to rock the funky beats, funky beats, funky beats, beats, rock the funky beats. And I just heard that record, I was thinking, what a brilliant idea. And I had this record called Tracks of the Vinyl Dogs.
Check it out right about now. It's no other than the Funk Soul Brother, the Lord Finesse, and you're welcome to the world of the Vinyl Dogs right about now. So if you're digging, peep how we do it like this.
And it was introduced by a rapper called Lord Finesse. And I was thinking, right, what happens if you chop these syllables up? And I got this rhythm right about now, the Funk Soul Brother. But the rhythm was fast. You know, I'd been making sort of hip-hoppy records at 105 BPM, housey records at 128 BPM. This is like 170 BPM, so it's like, it's either got to be a drum and bass record, and I'm thinking, I don't want to make a drum and bass record. But then I remembered the night before, I'd played this Northern Soul record by the Just Brothers called Sliced Tomatoes. In my head, like, this is a groove. It's a groove and it's a fast groove. So I just thought, what if you put that vocal over that groove, and immediately it sounded like a good record. It sounded really catchy and poppy, but it also was completely wrong. But it was so wrong that it was right, and I knew it was catchy.
About now, the Funk Soul Brother. Check it out now.
So I just bunged that on a cassette and then took it to Bali. And that was the last bit of the puzzle. Played at Zouk in Singapore, and the lovely owner gave me me and my girlfriend, a week in Bali as part of the package. So we were sitting on the beach in Bali, and I was watching people surf. Now, I'd never seen people surf in real life before. And I've got my little Walkman, and I've got this demo of this half-finished idea that I know is catchy, that needs one more element. So I started in my head, I was thinking, and it's like, that's the third piece of the puzzle. So the record was built out of 3 different genres that didn't necessarily need to go together, but it sounded good when they did. It wasn't difficult to clear the samples. The only difficulty was Lord Finesse. Because it was a bootleg, we went and cleared it with what we thought was the owner, and then Lord Finesse came and said, "Are you going to pay me for that sample, by the way?" We said, "Oh, we already paid you." And he went, "Oh, no, you paid somebody else." And they didn't give me the money, but we sorted him out. We cleared the John Barry sample, and we cleared the Just Brothers Sliced Tomatoes. I mean, all I know about Rockefeller Skank was, as soon as I made it, I got an acetate of it, and as soon as I got the acetate, I played it at the Big Beat Boutique, and as soon as I played it at the Big Beat Boutique, I knew we were onto something major here. And it's really weird because I put it on and everyone's going nuts, and I was like really excited because it's like my new tune, and I was going, it's me, it's my new single, and they kind of went, yeah, we figured. So it was like everyone in the club kind of knew where we were going to go next. The 3 records that broke me were Renegade Master, Rimple Masher and Rockefeller Skank, and they were like 3 in a row. I went from the Championship to the Premier League with those three records.
Right about now, the Funk Soul Brother. Check it out now, the Funk Soul Brother. Right about now, the Funk Soul Brother. Check it out.
The video's where it all went wrong, but at the same time kind of right. Until then, we hadn't spent any money on videos. So you go from like making a record and just banging out however many 12-inch singles to, oh, we need a campaign, and we're going to, and we're going to make an album, and we're going to make a video, and it's going to cost £50,000. I'm like, hold on, we've just gone from no risk to £50,000. But when we signed to the American record company, and when they sniffed a hit with Rockefeller Skank, they said, we want to make a video. I got a treatment which sounded really good, that it was it was one constant zoom, so everything that happened was one long zoom. You know, like in Jaws where they do the reverse focus pull. So we had booked to do that. I'd flown over to Los Angeles to do it, to film it, to do my little cameo. And we got there, and then it was just like a whole load of cliches thrown together. I looked at all the things, and they had the jacked up car, they had break dancers. God, this is just like every kind of shit rap cliche rolled into one. And what about the focus pull thing? They went, oh yeah, that idea we moved on from. And I was a bit despondent about it. And then that night I went back to my hotel room, and in my hotel room was a VHS which just said Rockefeller Skank on it. There was a little letter saying, "Dear Norman, I saw this guy dancing outside the Chinese Theatre to your record, thought you might like to see it." And it was this crazy crackhead doing this weird, bad dancing to Rockefeller Skank. And I thought, this is genius. And then it said, "Love Spike." So I said to my record company, they said, "Oh, did you see the VHS?" And I said, "Yeah, who's this Spike guy?" And they went, "Spike Jonze, he's like a really famous video director." And I was like, oh. I was like, if we can get Spike to find this crackhead, we can film it, again properly. And they went, "No, the crackhead is Spike." I didn't realise that was him doing the dancing. I just said, right, let's scrap this really expensive video we're going to make for Rock of a Skank. This is the video. And they went, no, you can't do that. We've invested too much money in it already. You've got to go through with that. But you can use Spike on your next single, and obviously you've probably guessed by now that that's the Praise You video was the same idea but augmented and developed. And I still hate the video for Rock of a Skank. It makes me wince. It's just like every cliche that I hate thrust upon me, right down to the cowboy hat that they made me wear.
Funk Soul Brother, right about now. Funk Soul Brother, check it out now.
I accidentally walked into a Daft Punk video shoot whilst filming it. One of the scenes, the surfing bit, they gave me an address on Laguna Beach, and I was in a hire car, so I think it's me and Ashley. We drove down to this beach and we saw a film crew shooting a video, so we thought, oh, that must be us. So we parked and we walked down. I sat down and I started having some lunch because we were quite hungry. And nobody really sort of came up and said, oh, you're here, or hello. They'd gotten with what they were filming. And then just as I saw two guys dressed as robots, just as I saw that, a guy came and said, excuse me, what are you doing? You know, are you part of the crew? And I said, actually, this is my video that they're filming. They went, don't think it is. I was like, Fatboy Slim? They went, no, this is Daft Punk. And I was like half a mile up the beach with another film crew filming the surfers.
About now, the Funk Soul Brother, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now.
The trouble with Big Beat is at that time we were having so much fun breaking all the rules and breaking all the genres and trying to get rid of all the cliches. The trouble was 2 or 3 years later, then we became the cliche. You know, we became the formula. I got offered a TV advert, which was good money, and it was to remix Elvis Presley song called A Little Less Conversation. And they gave me the sort of blueprint, and it sounded exactly like, you know, you just want Brimful of Usher with Elvis singing it. And they're like, yeah, pretty much. And I'm like, nah, not really, no. And then somebody else did it, and I heard that advert on the telly all the time, and every time I heard it I just winced. Most of the pioneers, you know, like sort of Tom and Ed and people like that, we were very aware that like the good shit Big Beat is going down and we don't want to go down with it. So we were just like, you know, everyone say, what's your next album going to sound like? I just say, just not like that. I don't know what it will sound like, but it can't sound like that. I eventually tired of playing all my tracks, but you just can then mash them up in a different style. I never tire of the audience's reaction when they hear Right About Now, the Funk Soul Brother. The whole room just moves. But in its original form, I haven't played it for many, many years, but we've got an acid house version, I've mashed it up with Twist and Shout by the Beatles. Satisfaction Skank is the bootleg that I did many, many, many years ago, which got bootlegged a lot, and may one day see the light of day, because that's one's still got legs. So yeah, Satisfaction Skank is basically using Satisfaction by Rolling Stones as the backing track, rather than the Just Brothers.
Right about now, the Funk Soul Brother, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now. The Funk Soul Brother, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now.
Just the fact that if somebody says, in the room says Right About Now, someone else would go the Funk Soul Brother. You can't, you know, getting your way into people's consciousness like that much, you can't fail to be impressed and delighted by that.